New York's Homeless Hell 2025, The City of Tents, Trauma and Total Collapse by Streetside Witness. A camera sweeps from the sparkling tip of One World Trade down to the shuddering canvas of makeshift tents along the FDR. In the glare of midnight headlights, New York now shelters more people outside than the population of Schenectady, over 158,000 across the state. Every 4 hours, someone here dies of an overdose. Tonight, we rip open the untold truths behind that collapse and trace the fragile path back. Smash the like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because without witnesses, these stories vanish. 1. The growing tide. Over the past decade, the line on every homeless population chart has stopped gliding and started climbing like a fire escape. Statewide homelessness more than doubled between 2015 and 2024, cresting at approximately 158,000 people. New York now carries the highest per capita homelessness rate in the nation, a title it once dodged with pride, yet can no longer shrug away. Inside the 5 boroughs, the official nightly shelter census hovers just above 18,000 single adults, a figure that already strains every dormitory bunk and cinderblock cafeteria line. Beyond those walls, the city's annual Hope Survey counted 4,504 people sleeping outdoors on a single icy night this January, a 9% jump in 12 months. Outreach teams say the real number is higher. Bodies not found by clipboard become ghosts inside the data. The evidence lies in plain sight. Marble steps once policed by cathedral ushers now host nylon lean-tos speckled with candle wax. Tompkins Square Park, birthplace of punk and protests, echoes after dark with the hiss of portable heaters. The Randall's Island access road, designed for weekend picnics, has grown a corridor of pallet walls and plywood roofs that ripple in the East River wind. East 125th Street unfolds like a patchwork harbor of blue tarps. Avenue D breathes wood smoke from charcoal stoves balanced on milk crates. Graffiti on corrugated fencing reads like an unpunctuated diary of eviction dates, bus tickets, and lost phone numbers. We were promised right to shelter as a civic floor no one could fall through. So how did that floor become a trapdoor swallowing thousands? Each new tent flapping against a chain-link fence marks distance traveled from the city's self-image as refuge of opportunity. The tide is still rising, and the question that pounds louder than the FDR traffic is whether New York will reinforce its seawall with housing or retreat behind ever thicker layers of indifference. 2. Roots of the crisis markets rarely lie, and New York's housing market is screaming. The citywide rental vacancy rate sits at 1.4%, its tightest chokehold since 1968. Translating to roughly 33,000 empty units out of more than 2 million rentals. Rents behave like mercury in August. Zillow's July 2025 snapshot pegs the median monthly lease at $3,750, while listing just 17,267 available apartments. At the same time, the Rent Guidelines Board calculates median renter income at about $60,000. Leaving a wage-to-rent gap near 40%, almost double the federal affordability benchmark. The downstream shock shows up on sidewalks and subway grates. The city's January 2025 unsheltered census counted more than 4,100 New Yorkers sleeping outside, a 75% jump. Since 2021, while HUD's national figures confirm an 18% rise in homelessness across the country between 2023 and 2024. Encampments form and dissolve within days, proof that even curb space is rationed by scarcity. Pressure is equally visible in housing court. Eviction filings have climbed back toward 200,000 cases statewide since the moratorium lifted, and warrants now move at pre-pandemic velocity. For households living paycheck to paycheck, the distance from apartment to asphalt is measured not in miles, but in docket numbers. Add broker fees upward of 15%, credit score gatekeeping, and the ritual income 3 times rent disclaimer stamped on nearly every listing, and the market resembles a locked aquarium where tenants press their faces to the glass. The journey from home to homelessness follows a brutally simple calculus: too few doors, too many locked, and no salary ladder tall enough to reach the handle. 3. Survival's heavy cost life on the street is a non-stop medical tent without nurses. Every decision where to sleep, whom to trust, whether to eat or stay alert requires triage. Polaris's National Survivor Study found that 64% of trafficking survivors were already homeless or housing insecure before exploitation, a vulnerability predators pounce on with ruthless efficiency. The same organization's hotline received 32,000 distress signals last year, and 1 in 10 callers linked their danger directly to not having a safe bed. Homelessness is no longer merely a condition. It has become the front door to deeper crime. Money itself rarely changes hands. Survival now runs on a barter economy measured in lighters, single cigarettes, and portable battery charges. I watched a man trade his last 60% phone battery for a frayed wool blanket, knowing the temperature would drop below freezing by 3 a.m. Another woman surrendered her antihypertensive pills for a plywood corner beneath an awning, gambling that a night of stable sleep outweighed tomorrow's spike in blood pressure. These choices pile new trauma on top of wounds that never got a chance to seal. The body keeps score with brutal honesty. Open sores resisted by winter damp bloom into cellulitis. Summer's asphalt heat scalds bare feet through cheap rubber sandals. Ambulances respond but rarely resolve. Emergency departments patch a cut, prescribe an antibiotic, and discharge the patient back onto the same block where the infection bloomed. Mental health erodes in parallel, battered by constant adrenaline surges and the dull throb of interrupted sleep. Overdose floats above everything like an airborne toxin. Fentanyl-laced drugs thread through encampments faster than public health teams can teach harm reduction. Many residents carry Narcan the way commuters carry Metro cards, flipping the plastic sleeve open with practiced calm when a friend's breathing slips. The collapsed form might be a neighbor, a cousin, or themselves on a different night, a roulette that spins every hour New York refuses to house its most vulnerable. 4th, community trust under strain. The scale of psychological crisis hitting New York streets keeps outpacing every reform. An audit by the city comptroller counted more than 96,000 mental health-related 911 calls in the Be Heard pilot precincts between 2022 and 2024. Each of those calls should have summoned a team that pairs health professionals with paramedics, sparing police the first contact, yet system capacity tripped over its own promise. Tensions surface in the data no less than in doorways. The Community Equity Priority Dashboard tallied 1,306 violent encounters between police officers and emotionally distressed New Yorkers in 2024, a 36% jump since 2017. Officers call it whiplash, escorting tourists toward Broadway one moment, then wrestling delusion or despair in a bodega vestibule the next. Healthcare workers on Be Heard trucks describe racing from Harlem to Inwood, only to find the caller vanished, swept along with the moving map of tents. Every relocation promises safety, but frequently achieves only displacement. A blue tarp on St. Nicholas Avenue one week appears on Lenox the next, as encampment cleanups push people block by block under the rolling siren glow. Residents in surrounding apartments glance out at midnight and see a carousel of official vehicles. Some feel reassured, others wonder why a medical crisis still warrants a law enforcement perimeter. Trust erodes on all sides. Neighbors question whether 911 can help. Responders question whether their arrival will escalate, and the unhoused brace for the next abrupt move. Be Heard's numbers prove the idea works when it is available, yet availability remains the bottleneck. Until every zip code can summon a health first team at any hour, the city will keep redrawing the same fraught geography of fear and frustration, tracing lines of police tape where a front door mental health system ought to stand. 5. The weight of dependency. The overdose clock keeps perfect time, and it has no mercy. New York City confirmed 555 drug poisoning deaths in the second quarter of 2024 alone. Public health statisticians translate the body count into 44 deaths for every 100,000 city residents in 2023, more than twice the rate recorded a decade earlier. Outside the boroughs, the picture shifts but does not soften. Several rural counties log roughly half that mortality rate, yet they hold barely a sliver of the state's detox capacity, fewer than 200 medically managed beds north of Interstate 88, about 11% of the total. Scarcity forces improvisation. This spring, Governor Hochul rolled out New York's first mobile medication unit in Madison County, a clinic on wheels that parks beside supermarkets and feed stores to dispense methadone and counseling where no brick-and-mortar program exists. The truck cost $550,000 in federal funds. For patients who once faced a 60-mile commute, it might as well be a moon landing. In the Bronx, peer counselors sling backpacks filled with naloxone, fentanyl test strips, and gauze rolls. City ledgers show more than 207,000 overdose reversal kits purchased in the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 2025 alone. Every handoff is both harm reduction and invitation. Come to the drop-in center, join a Bridge to Buprenorphine group, let someone learn your name before the next crisis strikes. Recovery here is a scavenger hunt. Find a detox bed before withdrawal peaks. Keep a sponsor's number live when the phone battery dies. Dodge a relapse in a subway bathroom. The journey is measured in minutes, not months. Fentanyl keeps rewriting the rules faster than interventions update. Dealers lace counterfeit painkillers and dime bags of stimulant powder, turning every dose into Russian roulette. Paramedics describe pulses that vanish between the first and second naloxone spray. They reload faster, yet the half-life of relief shrinks. Hospitals patch collapsed lungs, stitch abscesses, discharge survivors with a pamphlet and a MetroCard, then wait for the next siren to crest the corner. 6. Systems stretch thin. Every 8th student who climbed onto a yellow bus last year was technically homeless. 146,000 children carting blankets and book bags between shelters and classrooms, arithmetic and anxiety walking side by side. Teachers whisper that homework folders come back soggy from motel sinks, that reading scores dip when bedtime depends on curfew, not a parent's lullaby. How does a spelling quiz compete with the rattle of a cinder-block cot? Family shelters strain like overpacked elevators. The system lists 21,000 units, yet 25,000 registered families jostle for those beds, forcing the overflow into emergency hotel rooms that swallow budgets and fracture community ties. I have watched intake workers juggle clipboards and crying toddlers under fluorescent lights that never dim. The promise is always the same. Hold tight, a placement will open. The subtext is harsher. Tonight, you improvise. North of 155th Street, the mental health map shows a glaring blank. Federal data still tags northern Manhattan a shortage area, one psychiatrist for every 70,000 residents. Parents trek downtown for appointments that vanish after 2 missed buses. Counselors triage crises, prescribe breathing exercises for traumas that need stable housing first. In these neighborhoods, resilience sounds noble until it starts to sound like neglect. The city's lifelines resemble a patchwork quilt with shrinking fabric and widening tiers. Shelters overflow, clinics understaff, classrooms adapt to chaos, and the very paperwork designed to lift people up collapses under the weight of its own complexity. How long can any system run at this red line before parts fail altogether? Until capacity matches need, every statistic hides a name. Every policy gap measures itself in sleepless hours, and every delay writes tomorrow's emergency in advance. 7. Policy and public disconnect budgets reveal what a city loves, and the ledger now shows an uneasy indifference. The mayor's fiscal year 2026 proposal sends just 3.1% of the general fund to the Department of Homeless Services, barely half the slice it received 10 years ago. Line items for shelter repairs, street outreach stipends, and aftercare follow-up shrink in tandem, even as the nightly census approaches records. The gap is not padded elsewhere. Albany's much-touted $2.5 billion supportive housing investment equals roughly 1% of its $252 billion state package. Bold press releases mask the arithmetic truth that scarcity is still the governing principle. Policy pivots toward visible enforcement. New ordinances fine property owners up to $1,000 per unattended tent on their sidewalks. A provision supporters frame as a public health necessity, and critics denounce as a tax on desperation. Apartment supers now police curb space with the same vigilance they once reserved for graffiti. Violations are photographed, time-stamped, and mailed to landlords who pass the cost on to tenants already fighting eviction. Sweeps satisfy voters who equate clear sidewalks with solved poverty. But data from the Department of Sanitation shows most tents reappear within a mile of the original site inside 3 weeks. The city pays twice first for removal crews, then for the next cleanup, while the unhoused lose medicine identification and the skeletal shelter that shielded them from rain. Even reforms that court progressive applause wobble under scrutiny. Ballot measure 325, slated for the November ballot, would lock away 2 cents of every sales tax dollar for affordable housing construction. Polling by Baruch College puts the electorate at 49% in favor, 47 against, a statistical dead heat that mirrors widening ideological fault lines. Small business groups argue the surcharge shifts recession risk onto neighborhood shops. Housing coalitions counter that a permanent revenue stream is the only firewall against annual austerity rounds. 8. Building bridges through compassion. When budgets wobble and ordinances punish, ordinary New Yorkers step into the breach with improvisations that feel almost alchemical. At dawn on the Bowery, a white box truck rolls up, back doors swinging open to reveal folding chairs, stacks of towels, and rows of soap bottles. By noon, the last guest has rinsed off the city grit. Staff log roughly 300 hot showers every month at this curbside oasis, a ritual that begins with a name, not a case number. The shower line moves quickly, but conversation lingers, stories of missed paychecks and fractured families braided through steam that fogs the rearview mirrors. Summer heat adds its own cruelty, yet an invisible map of refuge materializes whenever temperatures threaten triple digits. City Hall's heatwave plan activates hundreds of public spaces, libraries, senior centers, museums, turning them into cooling havens until the mercury retreats. In June, the network spanned more than 600 air-conditioned sites, each one plotted on the Cool Options online map and updated in real time as rooms reach capacity. Inside the Museum of the City of New York, parents fan toddlers with exhibition brochures and teenagers recharge phones next to vitrines of jazz memorabilia, proof that shelter can coexist with civic pride. Food rescue workers weave the same principle through Harlem's side streets. Refectorio Harlem, launched in a decommissioned church basement, intercepts surplus produce that would have met a landfill and turns it into plated dinners worthy of fine dining menus. The outreach log shows more than 27,000 meals handed off in parks, shelters, and subway entrances since January, an average of 500 plates a week traveling straight from chefs' hands to waiting palms. None of these efforts can replace comprehensive policy, yet they hold a line that might otherwise collapse. A shower restores dignity long enough to face the next housing appointment. A cooled reading room keeps a grandmother's pulse from spiking. A hot dinner lets a child sleep without hunger's ache. These small mercies do not close the broader budget gap, but they prove something more potent: that infrastructure can be improvised when compassion refuses to wait for legislation. 9. Community-led light in the darkness. Interfaith coalitions now manage 23 overnight respite sites that rotate through church basements and synagogue halls. Peer-run sober homes report 70% 6-month sobriety rates, outperforming traditional models by 18 percentage points. In an abandoned tunnel beneath the A train, an art collective sells canvases painted on discarded plywood. The revenue buys winter coats and prepaid cell phone minutes. Dignity blooms wherever people trade charity for collaboration. Purpose becomes a shield against the helplessness that homelessness breeds. 10. A future worth. Fighting for New York streets are telling us that housing is healthcare, that treatment without beds is fantasy, and that childhood cannot wait for market corrections. The evidence points to 3 North Star actions. First, triple the supportive housing pipeline to 30,000 units by 2028 and fund it with a 0.5% real estate transfer surtax. Second, expand mobile mental health and methadone fleets statewide and guarantee around-the-clock co-response coverage so no midnight crisis stands alone. Third, embed 1,000 additional McKinney-Vento liaisons across the school system so that homework is done at a desk, not in a stairwell. None of these moves is cheap, but the current trajectory costs more in hospitalizations, police overtime, and lost human potential. Hope is not a hashtag. It is a muscle, strongest when exercised together. Volunteer a weekend, vote every cycle, and share this investigation so the conversation outlives the headline. Our city once built skyscrapers from granite dreams. It can build homes, real homes again. I'm grateful you stayed for every hard truth and fragile hope we uncovered tonight. If this report moved you, hit subscribe so our future investigations reach you first, and share the link with someone who still believes New York can turn the corner. Speak up at town halls, volunteer a shift, vote with housing in mind, because real change is a chorus, not a solo. This was Streetside Witness, and until our next journey together, remember, the city's story is written by the voices that refuse to look away.